All right, that was LCD Sound System, Someone Great, which was a choice by my guest today on the show, Sandro Schweizer, who is one of my former students, and he's going to be talking about his experience as a formerly incarcerated student and his education in the time of COVID-19. Welcome. You're muted. You're muted, Sandro. We've done all these sound checks, and now what happened?
I think somebody muted me. Yeah, exactly.
Somebody muted you?
Yeah.
Somebody did it
Well,
too?
hello. Thank you for having me, Professor.
Of course, returning the favor, I was on your radio show.
That's right.
Now you're on mine. Is there any particular reason why you picked that music?
We were talking about music, and this is just a song that has been following me through my whole life in a very positive way.
Yeah. When was that originally recorded?
I would say probably about 15 to 20 years ago. Probably about 15 years ago.
It's funny because it sounds a little 80s.
Oh.
It sounds kind of a little new wavy, but I mean, I don't know the band, which doesn't mean much.
It's a Brooklyn-based band that has just been incredibly successful as well.
Oh, very good. So thanks for being on the show. And we talked a little bit about the format. I like folks to talk about a little bit about their background. So why don't you tell us, where you're from, some of your studies before and experiences before coming to LaGuardia.
Right. Well, I was born in Switzerland, close to Zurich, where I have been going to what you probably would call something like college here. It's like high school, but it's a different type of education system in Switzerland. So after that, I decided to study fashion design or becoming a fashion designer. So I moved on to Paris, where I studied fashion design for 2 years. And after those 2 years, I came to New York to make a internship with a designer here in New York. After that, I went to London, where I worked for another designer and started my own label there that I have been having for like 4 seasons. After those 4 seasons, I went quickly back to Switzerland, where I couldn't really stand it for too long. So I came back to New York.
What is it about Switzerland you can't stand?
You know what? I love Switzerland. It's a great country. And for me, I just personally like diversity of people, diversity of cultures. And New York is unbeatable when it comes to that, in my experience. So in Switzerland, there is a lot of Swiss people compared to other people, and in terms of diversity, that's not exactly what kind of fits in my scheme when it comes to residential living.
All right, so you left Switzerland again, and what happened next?
I came to New York. I continued my label for a while, but more based on private customers, which kind of worked one way or the other, but still, like, I didn't know too much about New York. New York, someone moving to New York and opening their own business without, a concrete fixed salary or plan, it's very difficult because you have to understand first the Americans and then the New Yorkers and the very competitive market as well. In that respect, I tried my best to at least, keep myself over water. That worked out one way or the other. And as you mentioned in the introduction, in my introduction, at some point I took some choices that put me into the system. What do you call it here in America? And after that,
some people call it the the prison industrial complex, because it's at least here in New York, one of the issues that we deal with is that in upstate New York, they make a living on keeping people incarcerated.
Right, it's a private business, yeah.
And so when it's not even private, it's public too. People make some of these towns don't have any other industry, And with the Rockefeller drug laws, they, swelled it swelled in 70s, 80s, 90s. And, now where we're trying to change those laws and maybe release a lot of these people, suddenly these prisons are going to become, uh, you know, uh, you know, underpopulated. And the question becomes, do you keep them running? So
Yeah,
it's
when I say private, I just mean the actual institutions are run privately, I would say, and but paid by, government money. So that's a big difference to other prison systems all over the world.
Well, we have the most people incarcerated, and so they have come up with this. I mean, in different states, it's even more private. I mean, was that your experience when you were incarcerated in New York State, that you were in a privately run institution?
To be honest with you, I didn't really care too much about that, but many, but of course, like
Okay.
it's been the talk within the incarcerated people. They're like, oh, they just want to make money of us and this and that. But in the end, if you break the law, like I mean, I don't actually know a single person that has not ever broken any law in their life. So that would be a point number one. Then
Right.
unless it, and like I haven't met anybody that was completely innocent, in throughout this process. So it's easy to blame
Right.
it on others than to actually try to learn something out of this
Right.
process.
Okay. That's another
Right.
show. So but then you found yourself in our neighborhood, right? You found yourself in the Queens Correctional Facility on the corner of 47th Avenue and Van
Right.
Dam, and that's what brought you into contact with LaGuardia. Do you want to talk a little bit about that, how that happened?
Yeah, I mean, to my own kind of surprise, like I didn't even think I would see America as a free person again for a long time. Even until the last day when I walked out of this facility, I thought like there's somebody going to be waiting for me and sending me back to Switzerland, which is probably would be a premiere for a Swiss person to be expedited back to. So maybe that plays part of it, but it's not up to me to make such analysis. Anyway, like, yeah, to my astonishment, I was transferred for my last month to this kind of bridge prison in Queensboro in Long Island City, exactly like across from your college. And there was I started college upstate. They offered me these classes. That's how I actually got back into college. Without prison, I wouldn't even be talking with you right now because I don't know if like the college path would have taken place at this point. So yeah, anyway, so I took these college classes prior where I got credited. I got credit for that. And but there at Queensboro, there was Professor Proctor that you probably know that came
Yeah, Shannon
right.
Proctor, philosophy program in humanities.
Exactly, especially in philosophy of law. And she came to the facility once a week just to have some classes, like non-credited classes. And I saw that like on a pinboard, and I was really excited about it. And throughout that process, I said to her, like, look, I kind of really want to maybe pursue my education. Tell me more about your college. So she was really helpful, giving me out all the information where, like, once I got released, immediately went to get into. So that's how I ended up at LaGuardia.
All right. Yeah. You majored in philosophy, right?
That is my major, yeah.
Yeah, right. Why philosophy?
That is a good question. That's actually the question I ask everybody on my podcast first. um, oh, interestingly enough, when I was offered these college classes upstate, the person that recruited students for these classes, you get put into classes that are offered inside the institution. And this woman said, well, you should go to philosophy ethics. That's one I took. And the other one was just, I think, a writing class or something like that. So I had an unbelievable teacher, professor in this class, in this ethics class. And I got so into it and I was really like excited about it. that it wasn't even a.
Do you remember who they
Yeah, I
were?
remember her name. I actually even tried to contact her, but just
Absolutely.
yeah, couldn't get hold of her. So anyway, she was
Oh,
really a fantastic communicator for the matter that is really tough, right? Like you talk about ethics in jail, like I was, that go figure. So I mean, even before, like there is a show in Switzerland called, well, you would translate it to Star Hours Philosophy. It's like a weekly program where they interview philosophers on philosophical subjects, even big ones too. And I used to watch that all the time. So, like having taken this class and then taking this course at Queensborough facility, like that was not even a question for me. This is what I have to pursue, if anything.
I get into this sometimes with my chair, Vera Albrecht, who's also with the philosophy
Right.
department. Excuse me, program, and I tell her I like I'm being actually I'm joking, but I say that as an artist I don't have any morality,
Hmm.
but as a college professor I have ethics. Is there a difference?
Uh, do you want to get into it, or should we just skip to the next question?
Well, we got an hour. I mean, we're going to get into some more
Yeah,
stuff,
I
but
mean that
I'm just
is.
I
I
just want to
mean,
I'm running that by because since the first class you took was the philosophy of ethics or whatever
right,
it
yeah,
is.
ethics in philosophy. Well, morality plays a part in it. Ethics is maybe a more, how do you say that, a more universal type of code of conduct, if you want. So, morality is a more personal code of conduct. I mean, I just really break that
That,
down to nothing right now. So, if we want to talk about that for
well, that's
half an
how
hour, we
that's
can.
the way I see it. That's the way
Okay,
I
good.
see it.
Yeah.
And what am I going to do? It's because I mean that's what happens when you hang around with
Right.
philosophers. It's like their
It's a
turf.
definition problem,
So
yeah,
when
of
you're
course, as usual.
but uh but it's something that I continue to because I mean we could talk about the
But you
morality,
see, there is a
the
difference
behavior
between
of artists.
moralists and morality. That's a whole other realm right there that is very prominent
Oh,
these
really?
days. Yeah, because you can be moralist just kind of almost trying to pretend to be a good person and use that as a force for your argument and trying to dismiss your argument opponent or whatever you want to call it, your dialogue communication other, and just say like, well, if you don't believe in what I'm saying right now, then you're just automatically a bad person. And so like it gets very
Right.
difficult there.
Those people bother me.
I,
The right. We thought there's another term, the righteous,
yeah,
who are I find particularly dangerous. But
nobody's really
again,
immune to it
maybe.
though. That's the problem. I mean, I wouldn't say that. I
Oh
never
yeah,
ever like, yeah,
we all get
yeah.
self-righteous once in a while. Maybe I'm being a little bit of that right now. So maybe let's get back to you and LaGuardia. So you get out of LaGuardia, you get out of Queens Correctional, and you start again. You start taking classes here. Were you taking classes here before COVID-19 hit?
Yeah, I have for how long? 3/4 years, 1.5 semesters, I would say. The last class I was
So
in class was my logic, first course of logic class that was. Yeah, I took like 5 or 6 classes or 7, 8 classes easily at LaGuardia in person, yeah.
right, and then then COVID hit, and I mean we wanted to talk about this as well, which is the experience of terrestrial versus online. So what was that like for you as a student, that transition?
I mean, the transition just happened, right? But like overall, looking back on it, I'm so happy that I was able to take these classes because it gave me something to do throughout the week instead of people that had to stay at home and maybe losing their jobs and just like stay at home and like don't do anything. So like at least with the whole online experience, it was something for me to get excited about every week and something to do every week. besides me doing my designing work, right? Like, which I also still, handled. But no, reality, I lost all my jobs that I had online back then. So the school actually really helped me to focus on something positive in that matter. So that was, by chance, a good thing
Right.
for me to happen. But yeah, of course, it's a total different story if you sit in a classroom or behind a screen.
Well, which one do you like better?
Um, 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 I couldn't, like, I mean, it's just such a big difference that I couldn't even tell you. Like, I can tell you what bothers me about one and what bothers me about the other, and what I like about one and what I like about the other, but in the end, it kind of evens out overall.
Chance to have a student tell us what what bothers them about one or the other. So, what bothers you about the terrestrial experience?
Well, compared to being at home, like, is you have to take a trip to school and back and make sure you're there on time. Like, if you're on a computer, you most likely gonna be able to be on time in class without any travel expenses, travel time. Like, so this more direct and easier way to take classes is definitely a plus.
So it's just the fact that it saves you time. It cuts down on the commute. Well, what is
Right.
it that you don't like about the online experience, and what's the negative there?
Well, here's the thing, like, if you take philosophy classes, the actual class really relies on people into with the material, and you probably as a professor have, well, you obviously have because we took a class together, experienced that you just see, a black screen and nobody says anything, nobody interacts, and you don't even know what's going on behind that black screen, right? So this interaction is sometimes a little bit intimidating. Trying to, be productive in class, because that's what I like most about classes is creating a communication, creating a conflict maybe, and trying to solve it within a group of people and that is definitely easier inside a classroom. Even physically seeing how people react to maybe a professor saying something, or creating a theory or creating a scenario, just seeing and feeling almost people interact with such scenarios is so much better in a classroom.
I mean, was something that faculty we've had to struggle with, which is what do you do when people don't want to turn on their video and don't want to turn on their sound? I mean, and obviously we could get into the ethics of that, or the whatever you want to talk about, which is, can you mandate a person to share their video, particularly if you're recording the class? And what do you do with students who, because we've talked about, and we've talked about this, the mandating of turning on cameras. What are your feelings about that?
I don't think you can. I don't think you will be able to enforce that, because the people that categorically do not want to turn on their cameras, they will just drop out of the class, because you never know what's behind that screen either, right? Like, you don't know how
Right.
the person is, how their day is, like what they're going through, or what's happening with them. Some type of an empathy towards the benefit of the doubt, right? Like, would be kind of expected as well. So it's very harsh to say, well, you have to put on and you have to do this. Like, people can come even to class being a little bit disturbed by their daily problems they have to go through. There, of course, you will see them, you will feel them, you will be able to talk to them. But with just the click of a button, switching off a camera, and it's easy to make up an excuse, right? It's like, well, my internet isn't working, or my camera is just broken. So, like, how can you enforce that? Like, how can you prove that this is not true?
Yeah, there aren't extenuating circumstances. Uh, you know, I guess the concern that people have is the fact that the student is not engaged, that the camera is off, the sound is off, and they're off doing a bunch of other things in the room instead of paying attention. And
Maybe,
people,
maybe not, though. Like, you never know.
right?
So
Well,
I'm
you
just
don't
saying,
know.
like, again, the
You don't
benefit of
know,
the doubt. Yeah.
right? And we come up with these little games that we things that if you're watching, raise your
Right,
hand.
right.
I mean, you saw me doing things like that. But part of it is that, and I got to look. I'll just admit it. I'll speak for myself that you know, uh, it becomes this thing about, are you paying attention to
Yeah.
me? Or you know, some people would say like, well, it's about keeping the student engaged, and and that I play a
Yeah.
lot of games in order to keep people engaged, but most of it is so that I don't get. I'll be honest, I don't get pissed off that I feel like people aren't paying any attention. Like you take the class with me, and you're not paying attention. That triggers me on a personal level. I wish I could be, like my wife, who's a therapist,
Hmm.
doesn't get personal about any interaction with her clients. But I mean, I
Good
had an
luck with that.
episode. Yeah, exactly. I had an episode on Friday with a student. So now I'm back in the terrestrial experience, face to face, and
Yeah.
I'm trying to get students to be engaged. Or I'm trying. Well, I feel like they're more engaged because they're in front of me and I can look at them. And I had one student who was obviously not listening and called him on it,
Right.
and made some remark about, now that I've got you face to face, I want your minds and your souls. And I had to back that. I had to back that. I had to backpedal on that one a little
Right.
bit. But I could just feel that, like, it's like I'm back to this other piece, which is like keeping people engaged who are in the space, because people can easily check out. That
Is
this is a
obviously
constant thing
difficult
for
on
faculty.
is obviously difficult on both sides, like being in a classroom or being online. I mean, I remember again back in the days when I was in Swiss high school, we had this one professor that said, and he was like a jazz musician, right? So he really liked music. And I remember him saying, "Well, if you have been to a concert last night, I will let you sleep on your desk right now because I really respect doing that, right? So you never really know the individual student is impossible to walk in the shoes of somebody else. You can try to maybe,
Right.
or to tickle a little bit more, a little bit more energy out of them. In the end, it's a very subjective matter.
Yeah. I mean, I had a faculty member when I was an undergrad, when I was taking English classes. He was a great. I'd taken some Western literature course with him, and it was probably, and it might have even been where I'd taken English Lit 1. You start with Beowulf,
Mm-hmm.
and you end up somewhere. I don't know with who. I forgot who you end up with. Uh,
Charles
Ben
Dickens.
Jonson or
Yeah.
somebody. I don't know. It's pre. I don't think you got to Shakespeare was the second one, not as I remember. Anyhow, so, and I'd fall asleep in his
Yeah.
class. And one day I walked up to him and I just said, I'm sorry, I fall asleep. I've been falling asleep. And he says, oh, I guess you're just
Well,
tired.
let me push. Yeah, no, I mean, let me push back on this notion because
Right.
when I was in high school back then, I fell asleep in almost every single class because I had so many other interests in my life than being in school and listening to what they had to say. Interestingly enough, I still remember so much information from these classes back in the days: history, economics, even philosophy, you name it. So, but I was 19, like, yeah, I went to this, like, let's say, like 1920, I graduated from that school. Um, it was just not my interest going to classes. Like, it was not on my, like, ideal agenda. Um, so now, like, twice as old, because yeah, I mean, more than twice as old because I'm 39 right now. I find interest in especially philosophy classes, which is for me difficult to understand. When I was in landmarks for philosophy, I was actually raising that issue in my essay, trying to make the point that even though philosophy as a subject is a groundstone for knowledge, a groundstone for science, even, like, because it's a PhD, it's philosophy, like a doctor of philosophy, right? So it all starts with philosophy somehow. Some people that have maybe a crazy idea and go beyond of what is like what you call common knowledge or empirically proven knowledge at this point. You just want to push beyond that, and once it is proven, is it the academic way, is it whatever way, right? Is it then it becomes science or maybe religion? That's a different subject right there. But it takes time to, I mean, really appreciate this discipline of philosophy, which as a young student, I don't. I mean, it is fair to throw him into cold water like that, but it's hard to expect from a 19-year-old to be fully dedicated to, questions of philosophy.
It's 1:29.
Sure.
I want to just take a minute to do our station break. You're watching LaGuardia Web Radio, WLGR. The show is What's Going On. I'm your host, Hugo Fernandez, and my guest today is Sandro Schweizer, who is one of my former students. And we're talking about his experience. We talked a little bit about his experience as a formerly incarcerated student and his education in the time of COVID-19. But I'd like to, it's interesting because you and I have talked a great deal outside of class, and you talk about the fact that, I mean, at this point, you're in college for love, right? For fun. I mean, you are not. You have a
Yeah.
profession, but you're taking classes out of the pure joy of the study, right?
Yeah, to a certain extent. Sorry, I need to drink some water. I feel like I'm getting a dry voice here.
That's all right. Yeah. I mean, when you were
To a
talking
certain
before,
extent, because
I bring up, yeah,
nobody goes dedicating their time for no reason, right? So obviously I must have, I mean, that's the way I see it. Obviously I must have a goal for what I'm doing, even if it's a slight chance of this to happen, like without any, like just like going to school aimlessly, that wouldn't make any sense. So I do have that as well. But I mean, it's true that it's not really the thought of believing that me graduating in school will give me, monetary benefits overall. Like if that's what you mean by,
well, yeah, I mean, the question would be, what do you, because you're gonna, when you go to your 4 year, you're gonna continue with your
right,
philosophy studies, right? You can be a philosophy, and the question that people always ask is, okay, so what do you do with a
right,
philosophy degree? Like, how do you utilize that in, let's say, the
right.
marketplace or the workplace? And do you have
Yeah, I do.
notions about
Like, I
that?
mean, first and foremost, like LaGuardia, like getting this 2 years, I don't know how many credits, 63 I got so far, whatever. Like, it was probably a trial and like just see, like, I mean, I could stop at any time, right? Again, it's not me being
Yeah.
forced on by anybody. Like, there's many possible motives why you got to go to school. So it was maybe a trial, and I just always enjoyed it up until now, and I feel like, well, I'm still going to enjoy what a school can offer to me in this respect. So in terms of my personal benefits that I could, maybe even professionally take out of some philosophy degree would be continuing doing my interviews that I started in school, actually, right? So, like the interview that I had with you was part of an idea that I have, because philosophy for me is not like trying to make, I mean, for me, I mean, it's different ways to look at it, but one way to look at it is not trying to give answers to questions, what I'm gonna have to do on your show here right now, but also being able to ask questions that not only will benefit myself, will not only maybe help myself of trying to maybe figure it out, but maybe also an audience that is asking the same question. So if you ask the right person the right question, you might come to a surprising answer that will benefit many people at the same time. So if anything, like probably interviewing people like, this philosophy show, for example, that I mentioned earlier that I used to watch, that Swiss weekly philosophy show, something like that could be a potential future career for me, right? And it helps me in many ways. Like it helps me to formulate questions myself, and it helps me to just work through material that I'm interested in. And yeah, again, it might even help, a broader audience to deal with questions like that.
Okay. But and you wouldn't, so but you see yourself as, and then you'd be the talent. So then you wouldn't necessarily need a broadcasting degree to do that. The way things are working out now, like let's say if you want to be a talk show host, which is what it sounded like
Yeah,
you were
but you
talking
still
about
have to
doing.
be settled in your subject, right? And the subject is
Yeah.
the academic way. If you can't,
Right.
let's say, if you talk to somebody that in a philosophical manner, then you will have to know what Plato's Republic basically is about, or the allegory of the cave, and so on, and
Right.
modern philosophers as well. And that is easier to do in a academic standard than just trying to accumulate the knowledge yourself.
Right. I mean, it's interesting because students, and I've talked about this the photography program, when we have people speak and we bring in people from the outside who are successful. And sometimes you get a student who stand up and says, "Do I have to go to school to be a photographer?" And you know, the people who are like sitting there trying to answer the question, or they feel like they're on the spot because here they are at a school. They've been invited by faculty to talk to their students, and now they have a student who's actually challenging the entire institution and its existence
Which is great.
as a mechanism. Well, yeah, it is great. And I think again, the first when I heard him say that, I mean, my initial answer was like, if you don't want to be here, you should just, you could go.
Right.
You don't have to stick around. But but what it did do is it provoked me to try to answer the question if I ever heard it again.
Hmm.
And for me, one of the aspects of it is this organized method of learning.
Right.
That I mean, as a photographer, I have done photography in the academy and outside of the academy when I was coming
Hmm.
up before I got
Hmm.
getting my master's. And I certainly learned things in both situations, but I learned a great deal in the academy because it was organized and one thing kind of
Right.
followed another. There was there was thinking behind it, the
Hmm.
way it was being uh, shared with me. I mean, of course, the second reason is always the fact of building this network, a community of people, which is very hard to do
Right.
outside
I mean,
of the
if I
academy.
may
That's been my
interrupt you
experience.
real quickly, it's like that's a
Go
really
ahead.
good probably information for any student that is listening to this, is like knowing that a good professor wants to learn from a student as well. Like, it's not always as obvious, right? And some professors just wanna, jibber down their program, but like there is some really fantastic professors, and sorry to smooth talk you like that, you are one of them as well, that really want to not only teach but also learn. So the teacher is not only the teacher, he's also somewhat of a student that can gain, you know, great information from a student. Like just think about research, like professors that are more research than teaching orientated. We were just talking about that last week, right? So they are relying also on students to actually help them in the progress of their actual research, which is so
Right.
it's kind of a healthy synergy that a lot of students at first don't really understand, because you're not confronted with it with God himself. You're confronted with a professor, that's his title or her title, and they in best case want to learn from you as well.
Yeah, I mean, we had that. It was interesting because I can't remember what day of class it was when I was playing with my definition of art, and you were
Yeah,
challenging me, and I realized that it was not
right.
one or the other, but it was and or this idea, and
There
just so the
might be
audience, you know,
exceptions, or yeah, it's a healthy conversation. Yeah. But go ahead. Sorry.
yeah. But I would know that just I was willing to say, okay, yeah, you're right. It's and or, and again, I think that one of the things that students don't realize is that faculty are
Exactly.
human,
Yeah.
and and it sometimes when a person is challenged, they may not respond in the best way, and certainly not in real time, but you try to. Again, going back to this, my wife, the therapist, as opposed to me in the classroom.
Yeah.
But I'm still so yeah. No, I'm saying I'm learning a lot from this transition back to face, and it's as if I'd forgotten because again, for faculty, this is an ongoing challenge, which is how do you keep whatever number of people you have in the room, you
Mhm.
know, in the room, so to speak,
Right.
engaged with, and communicate this information.
Part of the
And
conversation.
when
Yeah.
when you fail to do that, it's pretty easy to displace your anger on the student rather than
Right.
own it and say, this is my failure.
Right.
If the fact that this kid's drawing when he's supposed to be watching the board, then that's
Yeah.
on
Still, I
me.
mean, the professor's main function is to, give their experience or knowledge that they obviously gained over the time they became a professor, which is, I don't even know how hard that is because I'm not a professor, right? So, but like the main function is to produce knowledge to the student. But that doesn't mean that the student has not the chance to, as a young person, give back while, creating a win-win situation, so to speak. I mean, I learned from my 5-year-old nephews and niece stuff, like I learned from them, and that children, and that shouldn't block
Right.
you accepting this dialogue, even though it's supposed to be, within the balance, a bit more towards like the professor gives to the students more. But a good professor will definitely receive, and that makes a class really interesting.
That's a good analogy because I remember talking about, how much I learned as a father, and I had learned about parenting by being a father
Mhm.
and by being around children. Uh, here's a question I have for you then. So what do I do with those 19 and 20-year-olds that don't really want to be there? That like you can tell. In fact, I'm thinking right now of one student I have who is in my class, and I can tell like he doesn't want to be there. He even made some remark about not wanting to be in college, and looking, uh, I can see from his record that he struggled. And what do I've made the argument that I don't know if I do students a favor
Mhm.
by encouraging them to stay. That maybe because it didn't work for me.
Right.
I mean, I dropped out of art school. I took breaks between, you know, community college and senior college and graduate school. And I mean, I found that the only time I was, ready to be in college was when I was ready to be in college. And, it took me 13 years to do it, but, I did it. And, a lot of the theories here, that a lot of times we're encouraged by the administration is we've got to do everything we can to keep the student in school
Right.
because the chances of them graduating are greater if they're going to school than if they're not,
Well, it's a
right?
business model as well,
That's
after all. That it starts a little bit there, right? Because with statistics, you will be by your supervisor forced to try the best you can, making students
right.
graduating, doing your class, finish it. So it's a business
Exactly.
model as well. It's one way to look at it. The other way to look at it is the being a professor part. Well, I have the answer for you, but if I give it to you, then you would owe me an honorary doctor title at LaGuardia, which is almost impossible because I'm
We
not
don't
a professor, right?
we don't
So
award
it's
PhD
not
we don't award
a,
doctorates, so
yeah,
that's out of the
so
question.
I'm not entitled to even try to give you an answer to that because I do not have the experience. I could
Well,
rephrase
but
the
what I am
question for you if you don't mind, because I would ask the question in that place differently, which is if, and I obviously at some point, actually, I really even at LaGuardia did consider just stopping that school. I talked to my father quite a lot about it. I was like, what the heck am I even doing there? Like, I don't believe what this and that professor says about this and that, right? Like, am I just doing it for a time? Like, I felt myself lost of what to do. So you would probably want to ask me if I would tell a professor or I would address that problem to my professor, what type of an answer I would most likely want to expect, which is maybe saying, let's talk about this after class, and then trying to make some, if you really want to be dedicated about every single student, which I know professors that do that as well, and I think you're even one of them. I don't know because I never addressed that question to you, but I addressed it to other professors, say like, well, stay here after class, we talk about it, let's see. Then you would question the student, what brought you into school, like trying to find out their motives for being in school, trying to find out their talents, and become very personal about their choices, why they are in school, and trying to help them throughout the path, which in your case probably is to call your wife and ask her to be involved as a therapist,
Yeah.
right? Like, because it's difficult, it's very difficult to motivate a student throughout that process.
Well, no, the only thing my wife has ever told me about my teaching is the fact that I tend to take on, you know, whatever it is, the anxieties of the student, take them on for
Mm-hmm.
myself, whatever, trying to, in the desire. Uh, yeah, I mean, I'm actually teaching first year seminar courses right now. By the way, we've got about 10
That's
minutes
fine.
left. So if anybody wants to ask a question, they should be doing it in the chat stream. But uh, this idea, well, because you get these students that come in, they're taking this class. Many of them don't understand why they're taking it. Yet every single day, it becomes very obvious of the things we're talking about, they're oblivious to.
Mm-hmm.
And whether they at the end of the class they're like, wow, I didn't know
Right.
any of this stuff. I'm glad I heard. They still question
Well, let me interrupt you real quick
the
here.
the course
Yeah,
the
because
course itself.
so
Yeah, go ahead.
the question is, what else will you do in the time you're not going to school, right? Like, because you obviously think it's a waste of time, and time is pretty much the biggest good that we have as a human species at this point. Like, I mean, that's just a claim. Like, you can agree with me or not. What would you do else in this time? So they would say, well, I will be at home playing video games. All right, fine. Well, let's build up on that and see if, one can actually, help the other. If not, I mean, there is a potential case that is, not fit for school, maybe just yet, right? Like, just, let's say, like me, like I could have graduated 10 years ago of what I'm doing right now. Interestingly enough, my first philosophy professor I had in high school in Switzerland, I was one of the worst students probably. I had really bad grades, and I just was not interested. I couldn't wait to run out of this class. I was like 18 years old by then. I reconnected with this professor just about 1.5, 2 years ago, um, because now I'm interested in the subject, right? So,
Yeah.
and he helps me through this process right now too. So maybe sometimes it's just not the right time and the right place. Sometimes it's a professor being able to find out, hey, what do you want to do, instead of being here and trying to offer them, and you really do that very well. I go into this in a second, like offer them solutions to still make this happen, because obviously process is not the worst thing that has been invented by humans, so to speak. But you, for example, and especially, and that's what I'm getting into right now, is you offered extra credit opportunities that would maybe balance out defeats within things people are not interested, but quality wise are pretty much the same. That will not only like it will motivate the student to do something that they really want to do, instead of just you know how do I say that politically correct, uh, be stubborn about a class program that has to be exactly like this, or otherwise it's a complete fail. Like giving this flexibility of living out somebody's personality within a class, which is obviously, as a professor, again, I'm not a professor, so extremely difficult.
Yeah. I don't know what point I was trying to make, except to go back to your issue of time. One of the things that a person can do in that time when they're not at school is to develop the desire
Mm-hmm.
to want to be to want to go back to school and do whatever they're gonna do. I mean, my experience was every time I left school, I went and went and got some job, which in the beginning was great.
Mm-hmm.
You made money, you had a community, but it got old, and you realized quickly that that was it. That's as far as you were
Mm-hmm.
getting in that role, unless you're prepared to, go into other things that I wasn't interested in doing. So one of the things that a student can do when they're not at school is to go back, and because I've said this many, many times, is like, I don't know if I can create desire in a student. Sometimes one of the ways I try to create desire is when I share everybody in the midterm and I tell everybody, this is your grade so far. And if you keep going at this rate, this is what it's going to be. And that creates a desire, because then the desire is to not fail or to
Right.
pass and get a certain grade. But it's not an intrinsic desire of, wow, I really want to learn about, art in New York, or I really want to learn about, you know, uh, art in
But the
general, whatever the course
counterpart
might
of
be, or learn about
the
photography.
counterpart of creating desire is creating anxiety, right? And you're really good in that as well.
That's one way.
No, no, I mean, sorry, yeah, I mean, I'm done with your classes. You don't have to give
Yeah,
me.
so you're
Yeah,
free
I
to
know I
say
can
what you
say what I
like.
want right now, because it's not like I'm, like fishing for a better grade or whatever. But I have to say that um, creating anxiety is probably not the best way to encourage a student to stay in that class. Just as a counter argument, right? If you create opportunities and clear communication of a student standing, and say like, look, you can still do that. And I remember you in class, you kept saying that over and over again, like, look, if you hear, you can still do that. Like, you show them clear communication, that's where you're at. You can still do it with your own creativity. If not, well, again, like, I failed in school before. I even failed in one class at LaGuardia, like, badly, right? It put me down a little bit, but if you really want to balance this out, you will find your network, and in best case, it's one of your professors that will help you throughout that process.
Right. Yes, I've jokingly said that I can be the traumatic experience in a student's life at a particular time, if that's the way it goes. We're running out
Cool.
of time. We got about maybe 3 minutes. But we know we're going to play. We're going to play some music as well. The other cut that you wanted us to play, which I think you kind of did. You create the imagery for that one yourself? Was that like
Actually,
your
the
own video
video is
that we're
part
going to
of
see?
one of my assignments for film in New York City, where I made
Oh,
I made
nice.
a short video with, like, it's just been an assignment. I just took the video, but the song has been following me also throughout my whole life, and I just find the lyrics and the composition and everything about it just very vivid. Since the song is called "Living It,"
Who?
it's very vivid.
Yeah, and who's the artist who made the
Um,
music?
the poet and maybe even the singer is Marta Sinader or Sinader, I don't know. And there is several different versions of this song. This very song is impossible to find online, but right now I just recorded it from the actual vinyl record that I have onto my recorder and just cut it together with that video that I already had.
Well, we got about a minute left. Anything last things you want to say, or anybody you want to thank?
Well, I thank everybody that's listening right now for sure, because somebody standing a whole hour of this chit chat has got to be praised.
Well, there's 5 people listening. We suddenly had a jump. It went from 2 to 5
again, yeah, well,
immediately. But so that must be your
maybe
buddies.
not. Like, we don't know, but like anybody that is making it through like a whole hour of this chat is, greeted with the bottom of my heart, or from the bottom of my heart. I think that's all I have to say about that.
I just want to thank you,
and I want to thank you
for being
too.
on
Yeah,
the show.
exactly.
Yeah, I've enjoyed. I always enjoy our discussions. Usually they go on forever, and we have to come up with an excuse to leave. And also, you're a great student, and I don't know if it's the age thing or what, but I would love having. I love having students that are engaged and want to be
Yeah.
there than the other way around.
Again, I wasn't always
But
like
having
that.
said that,
Either it comes or it doesn't come. So that's
yeah. But my job is to accept who walks in the room. So that'll be my
and
business.
maybe encourage,
But
or try to tickle out something of people that are not exactly there, and then it's a very difficult balance.
right.
Yeah.
So today my guest has been Sandro Schweizer, a former student, and we've been talking about his own experience. We talked a little bit about being formerly incarcerated, and also his education in COVID-19, the time of COVID-19. And I want to thank everybody for listening here on LaGuardia Web Radio, WLGR. What's going on? And Mr. Pope, if you've got the video queued up, feel free to play it. Thanks for listening.